Hey everybody! In this video I will give a brief overview of query services in Graphite and show an example of a query service in a project that I've created. In the sample project that I've created, I have a veterinary management system that stores data about animals, owners, doctors, and appointments. Let's look at the entities a little bit. So here I have my appointment entity, which points to animal, appointment date, doctor, Outlook, and Outlook details. So here if we look at animal, it just has breed, name, and owner. Owner is a person here. So here if we look at animals, we have cat and dog, which I just made as descendants of animal. Here's dog. And I didn't add any special properties for those two entities. In any case, if we're coming from appointment here, here's animal, and then here's doctor. Doctor is just derived from person, and it has an extra property called title. It has a process called getName here, which just gets the first and last name and it prepends the title to that. So let's look at the view. So here's my healthiness list screen. So the idea behind this screen is that I want to display the final appointment that each animal that visited the practice the purpose of this screen is that I want to show the last appointment for each animal and the outlook based on that appointment. I also have a link here that navigates to a details modal. So let's look at the query that I want to represent in my query service. The idea behind a query service in Graphite is that you can allow Graphite developers to execute custom SQL queries and then later use a data lookup shape to get the results from that custom SQL query. You can only return primitives, but you can use identifiers to later grab entities from the database. So in our case, we have an inner select statement here, and we have multiple join statements. This inner select is really what sets apart this query service from a traditional data lookup shape. Because here we wouldn't be able to group by animal ID, and this allows us to say, I only want the final appointment for each animal, instead of saying I want to grab all the appointments and then later have to filter them out using business logic. So that's the idea of a query service. So in here, to add a query service, we just have to go to the category that we want. And so since we're selecting from the animal table here, I'm just going to put this query service in the animals category. So here we just say add edit and then go to query service here. And we'll say animal healthiness result. So I use this result suffix to denote to myself later that I'm looking up on a query service table. So here if you just go to the query window, you can just copy in all of the text of the query that you want to execute and you can just use this update feature. So the update feature updates all the properties that we're returning here, and it just sets them to be invalid. So we just need to come in and set whatever types we want as outputs. So here's text. It seems like my Graphite's running really slow, so I'm just gonna restart it. Okay, so to add a query service in Graphite, you just need to select whatever your query is that you want, and then you can come in through the category window and say add query service. Here I'll call mine animal healthiness result. I use this result suffix to denote to myself later that I'm looking up on a query service table, or a query service instead of a table. Here I'll paste my query and I'll say update. This update feature, it just looks at the outputs that we're giving, so it'll be animal name, owner name, last appointment date, etc. And then when we come back to properties here, they're all just filled out as invalid. And so we just need to set the types of the outputs that we want. These outputs are all just primitives. So animal name is going to be text. Owner name is going to be text as well. Last appointment date. Here's a date. Outlook here is just going to be text. Outlook details is going to be text as well. Appointment identifier is going to be an integer. So anytime that you're returning an ID property, you want to set it to be an integer. And we can look up using this integer and compare it to the ID column. So here, if we look up on appointment, later we're just going to compare ID to the ID that we're returning here. But I'll show that later. So here we've saved our query service. And now we can access it using a data lookup shape. So in this view, we have the onload view behavior, we have a build animal display details behavior, and we have a build animal display detail behavior. And they'll be called in this order of onload view, which we'll call build animal display details, which we'll call build animal display detail in a loop. So here's the onload view process. And here I'm just going to, not a run behavior, but a data lookup. Here I'm going to look up a list from animal healthiness result named animal healthiness results. And here I'll add a sort by, which will be last appointment date, and I'll say let's sort it in descending order. Next we want to call the build display details list process. So here if we come in through animal healthiness list, build display details, right? We're missing an input here that would be the list from this data lookup. So I'm just going to copy this name, cancel. Here we'll say animal healthiness result is coming in as a list called animal healthiness results, which is, okay, it's a list, yeah. And now that I've saved this, then I can pass in the parameters here. Animal healthiness results, here I'm just double checking the name. And on the output we can say animal display detail or animal display panel dot display details. So here we're just setting display details equal to the output of this process, which is this display details list. And this process should be done. So let's fill out this next one. So here we're coming in and we have an animal healthiness results list. And so we just want to use a repeat shape here, which will be for each item in animal healthiness results as animal healthiness result in context. And then in this loop we just want to call the build display detail process. So here's build display detail. Again, we need to add in an input inside this process. So let's go in here. And let's say animal healthiness result. And it's a single in this case. So now that we've filled in that input, we'll pass in our in-context animal healthiness result. And then I'm going to take the outputs of this, which is a display detail, and I'm going to add them to the list, which is defined up top here. Animal display details, okay. And with that, this process should also be done. So now let's fill out this build animal display detail process. So as soon as I get here, I'm going to want to do something where I have my single data lookup, where I look up on appointment identifier here. And since we're looking up on the appointment table, we'll just compare this ID to this ID. So here I have my find single appointment. So here's appointment, and I'm just going to call this matching appointment. And the criteria, I'll say I want to compare ID from the matching appointment to the ID that was passed into this process via the animal healthiness result query service. So ID does not show up in the autocomplete list here, but we just know that ID exists. Oh my fucking god, dude. Okay, so now we need to build out this build animal display detail process. Here we're taking in an animal healthiness result, and we're passing out an animal display detail. So there are a couple things that I want to do right off the bat here. So one, I want to find my appointment record. So this is the same appointment record here. And I'm just going to compare appointment.id to appointment identifier. And this is the returned value as would be displayed from the query service. Here I'll just call this matching appointment. And I'm going to use the criteria of ID. So ID does not exist in this autocomplete list, but we use it as a backdoor, and we compare this matching ID to animal healthiness result dot appointment identifier, which is passed into this process. So now that we have this matching appointment, we can use it for a couple things. We can use it for this ID here. So this is preferable to using, say, animal healthiness result dot appointment identifier. And so if we were to use appointment identifier here, it would get displayed in the JavaScript as just whatever the ID is that's returned by this query here. And so it would say like display detail name would be display detail 5 for this record. So alternately, we like to feed in an entity here. And when a display detail is built and a name is translated for the screen, we obfuscate the name by making a hash of this ID as well as the timestamp. So now let's set the display item values for this display detail. So first I'll say I know that our results are one-to-one with our display items. And so all the display items are represented here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we'll take animal healthiness result animal name, and we'll set the value of the display detail display items animal name display item dot value. So since all of the display items are going to start with this name, I'm just going to copy this because I think it's the most annoying to fill out. So here we'll just come through and we'll say animal healthiness result last appointment date, and here we're just going to say last appointment date dot value. Next we'll say animal healthiness result dot outlook. So here in this one we'll say outlook dot value, and here we'll say animal healthiness result dot outlook details. Outlook details, and animal healthiness result dot owner name. And this one will be owner name dot value. Cool. So I've filled out the display detail properties. Next I want to set the UI parameters for the modal window. So here we're going to the details modal onload view, and we want to say display detail links, and then we can just look for the last appointment details modal link, navigation, UI parameters. And here we'll just pass in our matching appointment. Okay, so since this animal display detail is the same name as the output, I think that we're done here. And here, if you just follow this hamburger icon, you can see what we do with the appointment on the other end, on the other screen, once we get there. So we get appointment, and we fill out all these values for these display items based on the values that are passed in from appointment here. We also get the doctor name, put that in here, and then we get the owner name, we put that in here. So I think that we are good to build. It may be worth noting that when you make a query service does not require you to regenerate the database or to update the database for you to use it. So here we are, we're going to the healthiness list screen. Okay, we're just in the trial version. So here we have our appointments sorted by last appointment date here. Here's 5/5, 4/4, 3/3, 2/2, and 1/1. So here's our Boris Has Worms appointment. And if we look here, if we look at the appointment table, you see how animal ID here is 4 and 4 here. So if we did not use this group by animal ID, then we would have come up with 2 records that corresponded to animal ID 4. And so instead we grab the record from 2019 and we do not grab the record from 2018. So here we can inspect the hyperlink or the modal link, and I can show that this name here is turned into a hash. And that would be better than showing like 5 or something like that. So anyway, I'll show that values get loaded from the modal once you navigate there. Okay, so here I'm missing a mask, but that's not a big deal. We can just fix that later. But here's our doctor name, which was lacking from the other screen. And then here's all the other same values, but just as loaded from the appointment instead of being loaded straight from the query service. I hope that this video was helpful. If you have any questions, please post them to Goat Soda or in the comments section below. Thank you.